I'm assuming that Chama covered up to drill through. I was in the class to an extent. I think she covered up to drill through last week. So today we will start with buttons, right? And basically last week Chama was trying to teach how to basically make your Power BI report more interactive and basically add some spice to it, make it more usable for people. Because I mean, there's a difference between functionality and something that is easy to use. You may build a report that yes, it works, it gets the job done, but is it easy to use? So most of the tools that Choma was taking us through last week are tools that make your report easy to use for people. So slicers, how to synchronize your slicers, how to create drill through pages and also use them. And another of those tools in Power BI is buttons. And what are buttons? Buttons are basically, like I said before, interactive elements that enhance the user experience by allowing users to perform specific actions such as navigation, filtering, and triggering visuals or bookmarks. So, and on this picture here, this is a list of all of the buttons that are available in Power BI, and they all have different functions. I'm going to go to the demo now, and I will show you how some of the buttons can be used. So I'm going to open my Power BI. I need to stop sharing and start sharing again. Let me just share my entire screen so that this is easier for us. So yes, on my screen I have a blank Power BI report. And of course, for us to do that, I'm going to have to bring in data, and I will use this opportunity to help us to refresh on all the things that we have learned from the first class. So this is my blank Power BI report, and I want to bring in data into this report. What am I supposed to do? I'm going to need you guys to take me up to the points where you have been taught. So what am I supposed to do if I want to bring in data into this report? Anyone can just unmute their mic and answer that.
Click on get data.
Okay. Okay,
Then
my
you
data
click,
is in Excel, so let me click
you click
Excel
on
workbook
Excel.
and open. Okay, wasn't table 2, wasn't table 3. So okay, so what am I supposed to click next? Load, transform data, cancel.
If you're okay with what you have, you can load. But if you're not okay, you can click on that transform to start working on it.
Okay, so I'm okay with what I have. So I think I always just usually say, as best practice, it's better to transform, because what you see here is a preview, it's not everything. So you may think that is okay and it's actually not. So it's better to transform data and so that you actually see that your data is fine, that everything is how you want it to be. Check your data types and all of those things. So this data looks like a fine data. So we have sales here, and then we have table 1. What's in? Looks like sales. So the ID. They look like the same. Let me just delete one of it. Okay, so now that I'm done checking and the data is fine, what do I then click? Or what do I do? Hello, can anybody hear me?
Close and apply.
Close and apply. Thank you. So close and apply, and then we then have our data. I'm not going to go into the nitty gritty of visualization. I'm just going to build a few, maybe 2 or 3 visuals so that I can demonstrate what we are trying to do. So let me say order quantity by channel, and build another one. Let's call this order day. Okay, I need to have 2 pages for us to do this properly. Let me just quickly do another promotion name, profit. Okay, so we wanted to talk about buttons. So like you saw on this chart is not looking nice. Like you saw on the presentation slide, I mentioned all the types of buttons that we have in Power BI and how do you find them. When you come on your home, you go to insert and then you would see here buttons. So you click this tiny arrow down here and you see all of the buttons. Now there's quite a number of buttons in Power BI, and a few of them they're pretty straightforward in what they do. So left arrow, right arrow, reset, back, information, help, Q&A, and all of that. But I will just show us a sample of how each of them works and how to actually configure it. So for example, since we're on this page, let's start with the right arrow. The right arrow, now even though these guys have a way they look and it seems like, oh, what you should do is straightforward. Unfortunately, it does not automatically do what it's supposed to do. For example, when you see this guy, it's believed that it's supposed to maybe take you to the next page when you click it. But like I said, because even though it is what it is, it doesn't automatically do that until you actually tell it what to do. So after you insert your button, you need to actually go ahead and format the button, and immediately so this guy was not here before, but immediately you click on the button, you see this format button toggle will come up. And what you're supposed to do with this button is to then use this to tell the button what it should do when it is clicked, right? And the way that works is, so of course you can change the color, the height, and all of that. But I won't bother us with all of that. You can also give it a title if you want. Maybe say go to the next page or something. Let me just write there like next page. But then it's a little big. Most times in real life, I don't use titles for my buttons because it's usually pretty obvious. Of course, depending on the kind of button, but this one, you don't really need to have a title. So if you want, you can put a title. Also change the style. How do you want it to look like? Right? Any of this. So yeah, you can do all of that. But the most important part of this formatting the button is the action. So this is where you tell the button what to do, right? For example, right now by default it is switched off. That's why if you click it now, like I'm clicking it, it doesn't do anything, nothing happens until you actually set this action. So the first thing you do is to turn it on. Now it's on, but after turning it on, you need to say exactly what should happen when people click this button. So when you click this drop down, you see all of the options of what can happen when people click this button. Now there's back, there's bookmark, there's drill through, there's page navigation, there's Q&A, there's web URL, apply all slicers or clear all slicers, right? So the first thing so there's this, I'm going to put up three buttons first and help us to understand what each of those buttons mean, because they are like, well, I will say they are like they are similar to each other, and I will explain how they are different too, and especially this one, this guy. And just also so that we sort of, okay, to explain this one properly, I need to create a third page. Create a third page, and let me just do profit by brand name here. Let me name these pages so that when we're using them, it will make sense by brand name. Here is profits by promotion. And here is sales by month and channel. So this guy, let me take this one from here and put it on this page. So basically, the point that I'm trying to make is, even though Power BI lets you configure these buttons to do whatever you want, there is something called two things: best practice, and two, because the people who are going to be using your reports, you are not going to be there to tell them what the button does. So it's best to assign the action you are assigning to the button should be easily understandable. For example, anybody who sees an arrow pointing forward, even if you didn't put the title there, anybody who sees an arrow pointing forward would assume that when you click this arrow, it will take you to the next page, right? So even though Power BI lets you configure the button however you want, it is usually best practice to configure a button to behave the way a normal person will expect it to behave. So that's why usually I advise, if you're using this button, use it to mean go to the next page. And if you're using this one, use it to mean go to the next page. If you're using this one, use it to mean go to, let's say, page 1, for example. Okay, I think I should move, this will be easier if I move this page here. So this button should go to profit by brand name, and then this button should go to profit by promotion. So that is common sense. So how do you achieve that? After putting this arrow here, you come back to this action, and on the type, you select page navigation. So the moment you select page navigation, it then asks you for the destination, which is meaning, yes, this button is the page navigation, but which page do you want it to navigate to, right? Then on the destination, you come here, you see all of the pages that you have in your reports. Basically, you don't want it to go to the next page. You want it to go to, maybe you have up to 10 pages. You can also set that. Like I said, use something that is reasonable so that when people see it, they understand what the button means. So I'm going to set this one to go to profit by promotion, which is the next page. Then I'm going to set this one. Again, as usual, you have to first turn on the action and then set it to go to profits by brand name. So page navigation, destination, profit by brand name. So that way it makes sense that, oh, if I click this guy, it goes to the previous page. And then if I come back here, if I click this guy, it goes to the next page. And of course, you can have those buttons on all of your visuals, right? On all of your pages, sorry. Now I'm now going to differentiate between this other one, which is this back. But to explain the use case for that, I would, if anybody remembers last week, Choma taught us about drill through pages, and that is a clear use case of when you use the back button, right? The back button, there's temptation to confuse it with the other arrow, which goes back to, if you're on page 2, it goes back to page 1. But that's not necessarily what the back button should be used for. And I'm going to again do another chart to explain that. I'm going to have to do a drill through. Let me use promotion type and profit again. This other quantity, anything really. And then we create this other page, call it promotion name by other quantity, sales, profit, make it again. If you remember clearly, if you remember from the last class, I think Chama must have explained that when you use a drill through is when you want to sort of show additional information about a certain okay, so as I was saying, you use the drill through page when you want to show further information about a certain. Am I muted? Okay, thank you. So you use a drill through page when you want to maybe show further information about certain quantity or whatever visual that you have provided. So for example, we have this guy and we want to show further information about like seasonal discount and all of that. So you create this drill through page, and then of course you have to format it to say, oh, this is a drill through page, and you do that here. So you do that. There you go. So yes, as I was saying, so you have why can't I seem to find the drill through thing? Okay, you know what, let me use dates. Course. This data is not formatted properly. Anyways, I'll come back to that. So what I was saying is you use this and this to mean like front and back, but whenever you're using whenever you're using the back button, the basic difference between back and previous, I'm trying to not get you confused, that's why. So let me insert this one here so that I use it to show you. Now this button should be used when you want to go to the page where you were coming from before you came to this page, right? So for example, you did a report and you have a drill through that takes you for example to another page. Gloria, I'm sorry, Frank, I am on the call. I'm not sure why I can't find where to add the drill through, because that's the best way to show Maybe it's because we don't have the hierarchy in the profit. But so you can program this back when it's not necessarily the page before, like you have this page 1, page 2, page 3, but you want anytime you're coming from page 3 or even page 4, any other page at all, you want to be able to go back to that page where you're coming from. Or for example, you have an overview page that shows everybody's results, right? So, okay, let me do another example. Let's say we have this overview page that shows everybody's reports. Then we have another page that shows like the different states. Maybe we have like north, south, east, and west. Okay, let me just show it so that we understand clearly what I'm saying. Let's say this is overview. Let's say this page has all of the store, online, reseller, and catalog. Then we now have this other page that shows you have this page as an overview page, but you want every time you go anywhere, you want to come back to this overview page.
Okay.
Let me mute the person, whoever is on the call. You want every time you leave this page and go anywhere, you want to always come back to this page, right? You will then program your previous to say that you come back to action, and this is already programmed as back. This back here, it doesn't necessarily mean profit by promotion. What it means is it goes back to whatever page you're coming from. So for example, I come from profit by brand name, or I come from here and then I come to this page. The moment I click this guy, it's going to take me back to sales by month and channel. So don't mistake it with this previous one, because this one goes to depending on how your pages are arranged. But this, it does not matter how your pages are arranged. It goes to whatever page you came from. So if I come from this page and I come here, by the time I click this one, it takes me profit by brand name. If I come from sales by month and channel and I go here and I click this guy, it takes me here. If I come from profit by promotion and I go here, if I click this guy, it takes me to profit by promotion. So that's just the difference. For example, let me put that same back button here, and you will just sort of see the difference better. If I come here and I put it here, sorry, nice. I don't know what happens to my zone. So here you clearly see the difference. I'm coming from, let me come from page 1, right? And come here. I click the back. Takes me to page 1. I come from the same page 1 and come here. I click this one click this one, takes me to profit by brand name. So the basic difference between the two is this one here works based on how your pages are arranged in your report. However, this other one works based on where you are coming from in the reports. The last page you went before you came to this page. So that's just how all of these buttons work. Now, like I said, even though you can program it the way you want, it just makes sense to use it in a way that, and luckily it also helps that this one, every time you hover it, it always says what it will do. Control click here to go back to the previous page in this report. previous page in this page means the page that you were before you came here, irrespective of how the pages are arranged. Now, another button that I would like to show us, I'm not going to cover all of the buttons because they are a lot. So basically, this you can use to provide further information on your report, or you have a information and help, they're almost the same, or you have a website that you want to reference in your report, you can put it there. Then also we have the help, also you can use to provide further information. Q&A works sort of like the Q&A visual that we might have learned, or people want to ask questions about the report. Bookmarks also helps you to sort of have different versions of the same page. That's what bookmarks do. I would not also focus on that because of our time. But the last one that I will want to show us how to use is the blank one, because I really like it a lot. I use it a lot in real life, and I'm going to just quickly show us how to use the blank button. Basically, the blank button is like, as the name implies, is really just a blank book. And luckily also it doesn't have any, why I also like it is because it doesn't have any symbols. You remember that the other ones I was saying, oh, because they have symbols, you have to use them in a way that makes sense with the, so you are limited by the shape of the symbol, because if you don't use it, if you use it to do something that negates that shape, it might get confusing. But this one is literally just blank, so you can use it for almost any and everything. So for example, it's just really a box, but it's a button. So you can put a text inside it, you can put a link to a website inside it, you can even put a, well, not a logo, but I'm just saying that like it's really malleable, right? You can even put a, for example, a symbol of something that you want when people click that symbol, maybe it's some inside joke in your company or something, so that when people click it, you will always tell you what to do, right? And of course, you can also change the size and the style. You can have a title. You can have a title, so you can say, for example, call it, let's call it magic button. Of course, you can call it anything. And you can still have a subtitle, which will be under the title, but we're not going to use that. Then, of course, as usual, on the action page is where you tell what you're supposed to do. And you can also still use this for any of the actions, right? And I like the fact that this also, like the title, you can use the title to add more context onto what he is doing. And let me, for example, let me use it to do a web URL. It's one of the things that I use it for a lot. So, for example, maybe this my report was done based on data that I researched somewhere, and I want people to have access to, you want to read further on the report. I'm going to just look for a random website. Look for a random website, say, well, say TripAdvisor. So I'm going to just copy this website. Yes, and put it here in the web URL place. First, it's not going to show the website in the, it's just going to be there as a button. So it's on. And what text do I want it to show? So I can say reference okay, this is the tooltip, not necessarily the text. Let me put that in the text. So yeah, so you have your blank button and you have the website. So since we are providing a website for more information, let me just change the title from magic button to, let's call it um, details for more information. More information on data use. And this is the text that will be inside the button reference site. Or you can call it anything if you want. You can actually just put the group advisor since that's the site we're using. Put that there, you can increase the font size. So that's it. You have your fantastic looking button and it's just so neat on the report. And what that means is every time people click on this, it takes them to TripAdvisor, right? And this can as well be your company site, your whatever it is, depending on how relevant it is to your report. And that is how to use and configure a button. Of course, like I said, there are many other buttons in Power BI that you can use for different purposes. And these apply all slicers can use to control, apply or clear your slicers, can use to control all of the slicers that you have on the setting page of your report. And this also is a page navigator or a bookmark navigator. And that's how to use your buttons. So that is all that I will cover for buttons so that we can take actually what we originally have for today, and I will try to be snappy with that. Does anybody have any question on buttons before I go into today's class? I can't see your hands because I've closed my team. So if any hands are up, please let me know. Okay, I don't see any hands. So yes, thank you. Let me save this so that we can use it to continue into today's class. Basically, I want to save it as textiles 4 or 5. Okay, so back to my PowerPoint presentation. Today so just to round this, what are the benefits of syncing slicers using drill throughs and buttons? Like I said before, slicers enhance user experience by providing consistent filtering and navigation, while drill throughs and buttons facilitate seamless exploration of different data points. And if I remember clearly, I think it was the second class where somebody asked a question about, oh, is there another way to navigate pages different from just clicking on the page? And I think you have learned now that buttons are also another way to make navigation on your reports more seamless and to direct people the way you want them to go in your reports, right? Because the whole idea of creating Power BI reports is to actually tell stories. And if anybody who is a writer here knows that a key important part of storytelling is the flow of your story. And buttons are ways that can help you to also make the story you're telling with your data, make the story to flow a bit more seamlessly. Now today we are going to be talking a lot about Power BI service and how to manage assets in Power BI service. And as you might have learned before, At the beginning of this class, I think on the first class, the instructor was telling us that Power BI occurs in three different flavors, right? The first flavor is Power BI Desktop, which is what we have mostly been using in this class, and that is the place where you create your Power BI reports. It's like the I won't call it the biggest flavor, but it's like the most used flavor of Power BI. That is where you create your reports, and that's where you do all of these fantastic things that we have learned so far. Now, after you finish creating your reports, unlike in other Microsoft solutions like Microsoft Word and Microsoft Excel, where when you create your maybe you do it like a Microsoft Word document, then you save it, then you share your docx documents with whoever you want to share it with, and you start having issues of, oh, when the person's maybe the person is using Microsoft 97 and you created the document in Microsoft 2003, they start having issues. And then Microsoft came up with Microsoft Online in Office 365, where oh, and also another problem was that if you then make a change to that file, you then have to resend it to the person because you have updated it, right? And then later, Microsoft came up with Microsoft Online in Office 365, where you can just have a document in maybe in your OneDrive and you share a live document with the person. What that means is that when you make changes to the document, you don't have to resend it again to the person because the person has access to a live document. And that is similar to what we have in Power BI service. When you finish creating your reports in Power BI desktop and you want to share it with somebody, the best practice is to, well, especially in an organizational setting, and the person is not necessarily going to be changing the reports, the person just is going to be using it, consuming it. You publish that report to what we call Power BI service, which is the cloud version of Power BI. And when you publish that report to Power BI service, you can share that live report with the person such that whenever you make changes to the report, the person sees an updated version of that report. So that is basically Power BI service. And the another good thing about Power BI service is that you in Power BI service, you can then collaborate with people. If you grant the person the right accesses, the person can also make some edits to the report and a lot of other things that we'll look at later that you can do in Power BI service. A Power BI service is basically the cloud version of Power BI that fosters collaboration and also a lot of other benefits that we'll see later, like I said. And I think the final one that we spoke about is the Power BI app, which is the one that you can download on your mobile phones. And let me explain that Power BI app is only useful for consuming reports that are already created. Power BI on your phone, you cannot use it to build a new report. When somebody has published a report to Power BI service and then they share it with you, you will be able to view it on the Power BI app on your phone. Just view it. You can't change it. You can't do anything to it. You can just view reports on the Power BI mobile on your phone. So that is so basically so publishing reports and semantic models to Power BI service. When we publish these reports, you will see what I mean by reports and semantic models. So semantic models previously was called data sets. But you remember that when we started creating these Power BI reports, we imported the data sets, then we created the reports. Now, when you publish the Power BI service, there are two entities. There's the data sets, which is now called semantic models, and then there's the reports. So they exist as two different people, but not that they are separated from each other, but they exist differently. And I will explain to you why that is so. So when your semantic models are published to your organization's workspace in Power BI service, everyone who needs access to those models can find them in a central location, which provides opportunities for collaboration between teams. This also reduces the duplication of effort because one semantic model can be used by multiple users for different business reasons. For instance, one model can be used to create multiple Power BI reports because preparing and cleaning data can be time consuming. So what this means is just like I was saying, when you publish, so remember that when we brought the data into Power BI, let's assume for this particular data, we didn't do a lot of cleaning, but let's assume that you have cleaned it and you have done some sort of transformation to make it nice, and then you create your report, and then you publish it to Power BI. The next time somebody else needs to use that data, the reason why, or one of the advantage of the fact that Power BI separates the reports from the data, not like separates, but it stores the reports, it also stores the data separately, the cleaned data. What that means is when the next time somebody wants to create maybe another report entirely, but they are using that same data, they don't have to start afresh to clean it. They can use that same data that you have published into Power BI service and use it to create their own reports. And I'm also going to show you how to do that. I think that during our visualization class, we learned about publishing data to Power BI service, but then I'll just quickly go through it here. First thing you need to do when you want to publish to Power BI service is to ensure that you are signed in with your Microsoft account. When you open your Power BI report, Power BI desktop, if you are not signed in, you will see sign in at the top here. But because I'm already signed in, that's why you see my name here. Olayinka Oke is signed in. So the next thing you just want to do is to go here to publish this report online in Power BI service. So when you click this publish, it's asking down to save changes, yes. Then you click this publish, it asks you which of the workspaces you want to publish to. That is because, so when you log in, when you open your Power BI service, this is what it looks like. Yeah, I need to stop sharing. Stop sharing and open my Power BI service. When you open your Power BI service, this is home. This is what it looks like. And remember that just like I was saying, that before you publish to Power BI service, you need to be logged in your account. So this same account that you used to log in here, it is this account that is to be published to. So this is my Power BI service that I'm logged into here with that same account. If you check here, you see same person, Olayinka Oke. So these are the workspaces. If I come into workspace, these are the workspaces that I have. By default, you always have my workspace in Power BI service, and then you can create new workspaces. So I have previously created these two new workspaces, Fabric Developer and Textilers. So that's why when I try to publish, it gives me these three options and asks me where I want to publish to. So I'll publish it to Textilers. I'm also going to explain to us why we have different workspaces and how to manage them. So I say select, and so it goes ahead to publish that report and the data set. So success. I can either open it from here, or I can just go back to my Power BI service and I'll go to, so again from home, you come here to workspaces. I see all my workspaces. I go to Textilers. I go to Textilers, I will see this report that I just published. You can see it here. And you can see the date, 1851, just now, 2206. So like I said, you will have two entities. The report itself, which is this guy, and the semantic model, which is basically the data sets, the cleaned data sets. Now let me show you how the data set is different from the report. So if you click this report, of course, you will see the exact same report that we published just here. It's the exact same reports. These are the pages that we have, and also the buttons that you put there, they will function just the way they were functioning in the reports, right? Like here, if you click your normal previous page like that, everything just the way it is in the report. In the reports when we were on desktop, and then you can share with people. So if you go back to where we had to the workspace where we had the reports, you can just go here. So like I was saying, so why Why is it advantageous that we have the reports and then the data set separately? Now, if you open the data sets, this is what you see. This is what you see. The first thing you will see is what other reports. So it says see what already exists. So based on that report, based on that data set, sorry, we already have one report. Now you remember that I was saying that if somebody else wants to create a new report based on that data set, they don't have to start cleaning it again. They can create their own reports with that same data set, and it's basically simple here. You can just explore this data to get insights fast or create an interactive report you can share. So if you just click this guy, you can create a new report with that same data. And I promise you, if you have done uh, any sort of like data analysis, you know that cleaning the data is actually one of the most, can be, depending on the kind of projects anyway, cleaning the data can be a chunk of the work that you are going to do. So when you have data that is already cleaned, that you can use to create a new report instead of having to start afresh, it can really be a lifesaver. So basically you can just create these reports, right? And you can create another report based on this auto create a report, create a blank report, or just explore the data, any of these options. So let's assume we create another report and call it, no, I'm not going to waste time. I'm going to just uh cost of sales ICT. I'm just going to create something random and use to show us. So I can create this report and actually save it as another name. And that way we now have two reports. Enter a name for your report. Just say cohort 5 session 2 and save it. That way we now have these two reports under that data set. And now every time if you go back to Textiler's workspace and you click the data set is Textiler's course 5. You now see the two reports. So these two reports are now based on that one data set. And you can have as many reports as you want under that same data set. Because you have cleaned the data once, you can continue to use it for different purposes and create as many reports as you want based on that single report. Now that we have learned how to publish a Power BI service, and I was making some reference to workspaces later, and you might wonder, okay, what are these workspaces really, and what do they mean? Why do they exist? When you come home to Power BI, in your Power BI, yes, you see all your artifacts and all of that. But the what I want us to look at now is workspaces. Why do we even have different workspaces? So, for example, in a company, in the real life scenario, most times you have different departments, right? You have commercial, you have sales, you have production, you have manufacturing, you have operations, you have logistics, you have all these plenty departments, and I can promise you their reports will be different, and you don't want everything to just be all over the place. Just the same way in your folders, you have different folders for different departments. So Power BI also allows you to have different workspaces. The other reason why workspaces are important is because workspaces can also help you to manage access. So if you have different departments in your company, all you need to do is to every time is to have different workspaces for different departments. And how do you create a new workspace? Just come here to workspaces and you see new workspace here. And it asks you, what do you want to name the workspace? So let's say I want to say logistics, and I say, oh, workspace for logistics department. Okay, we don't have any domains yet, so I'll just leave that out. And you just apply. That way, every time you want to publish a report, maybe you know that the report is for logistics department, then you publish that report into the logistics department workspace, right? Now, because we have not published anything into this workspace, the workspace is empty. But a good thing is when you have workspaces, like I said, it helps you to manage access to your data assets. And I will just quickly show us in the presentation. So how do you manage workspaces in Power BI? So workspaces are created to provide order with respect to how organizations' data assets are managed. When you have created workspaces, Power BI uses role assignments to determine how users can access these workspaces and the assets that are therein. What are the available roles when you are granting people access to a workspace? One person can be a workspace admin, which means the person is allowed to update and delete the workspace. So you should be careful when granting admin access to people. They can also add or remove people, including other admins. Another role is the member. A member can add other members with lower permissions. A member can also publish, unpublish, and change permissions for an app in a workspace. A contributor is another role. A contributor can create, edit, and delete content such as reports in the workspace. They can also publish reports to the workspace. And then a viewer can view and interact with an item, read data that is stored in workspace data flows. So depending on the structure of your organization, for example, if you have people in different departments that are creating their own reports and they need to publish reports to a workspace, you need to give them the contributor role so that they'll be able to create reports, to edit reports. But like I said, the admin role should actually is not a role that you can just give to anybody because they can actually delete the entire workspace. And if you have people who are not necessarily technical savvy, they are just consuming the reports in the workspaces, then you need to just give them the viewer access on the workspaces because that allows them to interact with reports. It allows them to also read data that is already stored in the workspace. So every time you come to, so like we now have a new workspace, we have three workspaces. We have logistics, we have fabric developer, and we have tech sellers. So logistics workspace, basically there are people who are in the logistics department and they need to read the reports that have been created, that have been published, or maybe they even need to create reports of their own and publish them. How do you then grant them access to that workspace? You come to this place up here where you have manage access, and then you add people or groups. Automatically, because I'm the admin of the whole environment, that's actually my personal environment. I'm the admin of the whole environment, I'm automatically the admin of the workspace. But of course, I can add another admin. So, for example, when I say add people or groups, what you need to do is to enter the person's name or the email, that's the person's company email. So let's say I start typing. I don't remember what other people I have in this tenant. But basically you type the person's name, it pops up the person's email, and here you select what kind of access you want to give the person. So remember the four different types of access that I just spoke about. I can add the person as an additional admin, I can add them as a member, I can add them as a contributor or a viewer. Once you select what you want to add the person as, oh, okay, because I'm already an admin, I can't add myself as something else. So let's say I say admin and then you just click add here, then the person is added based on the role that you add the person to. So basically that's how to, and every time you come here, you see all the people that have been granted access and what their roles are. Now let's assume that you want to grant somebody access, but not to the entire workspace, maybe to only one report in the workspace for whatever reason. Maybe within that department, the person should only have access to certain reports, not the entire workspace. You can also do that. But because there's no reports here, let me just use another workspace where we have reports. So we'll go back to our cohort 5 reports that we created. And you can do this for both reports and when you come to this report, sorry, let me go back. Yeah, come to this report here, the report we want to grant access to is this textile ask code 5. Just come to these three dots here, more options, and then you see all of the options where you can, of course, anything you want to do with the report. But where we're going to here is manage permissions. You want to grant permissions to the reports, right? So what you do here is you can either create a link and share with the person. If you did this add link, you can create a link, and then anybody you put in this, any email address you put here, anytime they click that link, they will have access to the report, but I'm not going to use that. You can also use direct access. What direct access means is that they don't need any link. You can just add, once you do this, when you're using direct user, you just do this add user here, and you click you put their name or their email address. Again, what that means is you can still select what they can do with the report. Can they also share the report with another person? Do you want to allow them to be able to build their own reports based on the semantic model that was used to build this report? Do you want them to receive an email notification the moment you add them? And note that most of these things you can only do with people within your organization and not people outside the organization. So immediately you type the email address. Unfortunately, I'm the only person in this organization, so that's why my name keeps popping up. You have the grant access will pop up, and the person will have access to the report. What that means is that the person will not need to use any link. Once the person opens their own Power BI service, they are going to just see that report on their list as the reports that they have access to. Now, what happens if I create this link? If I create a link and I share it with, for example, Mr. Femi, and Mr. Femi, you remember that when I'm creating link here, I put the email address. So what I mean is that, or if let's even say I use this and I add a user and I didn't allow them to share it, but they went and copied the link and gave it to somebody. What happens is when that person tries to access the report, they will get a prompt that they do not have access to the report, but then they have an option to request for access. So when they request for access, when I come here again to where I'm managing permissions, on this pending, I will see the lists of all of the people that have requested for access. Maybe because somebody shared the link with them, but because they had not been granted access, they didn't have that access. You will see all of those under this pending, and you see their names, and then you can just click grant access. Of course, if that is somebody you want to have access to that report. So that is how you manage your workspace. And this is actually very important because many times in organizations, there's data protection, and I'm also working a lot in data management, and I'm beginning to understand that it's very crucial to make sure that people are only provided data on a need basis. If somebody does not need to have access to certain data, then you don't just open the data to the entire organization because you feel like, oh yeah, it's company data and people within the company can see it. Not everybody within the company should have access to different data sets. So people should only have access to data that they need to use for their job, not just every data that is available. And so that's why workspaces, and even within workspaces, you can still manage access to different reports and different data sets to make sure that people are only having access to what they need to have access to. Of course, that you can also do with the data sets, can manage permissions with the data sets the same way that you manage permissions with the reports. So either you create a link or you use the direct access to grant access to the data sets. So that is how to use your semantic models. It's difficult for me to call it semantic models because I feel like data sets is just easier for people to understand. But yeah, that is how to manage your semantic models and your reports in Power BI service. Now back to our presentation. The last thing that I wanted to speak to is Now managing your semantic models in Power BI service. Okay, I already spoke about managing access to semantic models. So the next thing I will speak to is configuring a scheduled refresh in Power BI service. So the scheduled refresh feature in Power BI allows you to define the frequency and time to refresh a particular data set. Scheduling the refresh will save you time because you don't have to manually refresh data. It also ensures that users can access the most up-to-date data. Right now, imagine that because we're doing this thing and you are seeing only 3 or 5 reports in the workspace. But in real life, I promise you, in a workspace, you can have up to 20 reports, right? And you can imagine that. So let's even assume maybe the company is in Europe, in America, is in Australia, in Canada, and you have a different report for all of those time zones. And everybody says, oh, I need my report to be refreshed at 8 a.m. every day. What that means is 8 a.m. in Australia is not 8 a.m. in Europe, is not 8 a.m. in Canada, is not 8 a.m. in the US. So you as the Power BI or Power BI analyst, you have to now set alarm for 8 a.m. in Australia, 8 a.m. in this, 8 a.m. in that, and then going to be refreshing the reports. But Power BI does not want to put you through all that stress. So you can actually schedule your report and say, oh, I want this report to be refreshed 8 a.m. every day. And what that means is that, for example, you have maybe it's a sales report, and every time a sale is made, the data sets wherever it is stored, either is in a SQL database or in Excel, that database is updated. What that means is every 8 a.m., your report that you have published to Power BI service will refresh and will show the current situation of things in the data set. Maybe yesterday we had made only 50 sales, but at this morning we have now made 60. The data set will automatically refresh and reflect those 50 sales. And the good thing is that you can set this to refresh as many times. If you want it to refresh 5 times daily, you just need to set the time to refresh by 8 a.m., refresh by 12 p.m., refresh by 5 p.m. and all of that. And that data set to refresh at every time that you have set it to refresh. And also, of course, there are depending on the strength of your network and some other latency issues. If you set it to 8, it might not refresh exactly at 8. To start refreshing at 8, but it may not finish refreshing at 8. It may finish refreshing at like 8:05, 8:06, and things like that. But then it will refresh. And also, like I said before, you can also perform on-demand refresh. So even after you have scheduled your refreshes for maybe 8 a.m., 12 noon, and all of that, if, for example, like you may be in a meeting, this happens a lot of times, right? In a meeting, the data was last refreshed at 8 a.m., and you're having a meeting by 2, maybe the next refresh is by 3, and the manager says, oh, I want to see the position right now. Or maybe I told the team to do something this morning, and I want to see whether they have done it. So can you refresh the data now? You can also do an on-demand refresh, meaning just refresh it now. Let me see what the position is now. Another situation where you may need an on-demand refresh is sometimes for different technical reasons, the refresh that you scheduled may fail, and then you still want to see the most recent data. So maybe the refresh failed and you checked, you saw the reason why the refresh failed and you have rectified it, and you want to check that what you rectified is now fine. You have to then do an on-demand or a manual refresh. That way you can verify that your report is now fine and of course still have up-to-date data. So I'm just going to quickly show us again how to set up a scheduled refresh, and we're going to come back to our report here. Now let me clarify here that you remember that I said the report is one entity and the data set is one entity. Now, because the thing that is refreshed is the data set feeds the report. But the thing that is actually changing is the data set. It is because the data set has changed. That's why the report changed. So the place where you schedule the refresh is on the data set, not on the report. And that's why if you're looking here, you can see only data sets or semantic models have the functionality for you to set a refresh date or refresh time. That's why the reports is only the semantic models that are showing NA. NA here means that there's no refresh scheduled. That's what's the next refresh time. There's no refresh scheduled. So we're going to configure schedule refresh on this one now and you see the difference. So how do you do that? You go here again on these three dots and you go to settings. When you get on the settings, you will see a lot of options. Of course, this is, you can add a description to your semantic model. You can add a gateway if you are using an on-premise data source, and also schedule a refresh. Okay, you need to set the data source credentials before you can schedule refresh. So, here's my data source credentials for you. Call me. Okay, so normally you need to set the data source credentials for the refresh to come up. But I'm not sure why this is not showing. Let me try to use another report. Okay. Let me use another report that may Okay, I'm going to try to. So usually the data source credentials is where you specify how to connect to your report, to your data set. And somehow on this report, for some reason, is not coming up. And if you don't specify how to connect to data sets, you cannot schedule the refresh because how do I explain it? It just looks like what it means is that you don't have the key to that data set. So you can't even refresh it. And so I'm not sure why this is not coming up. I'm going to try to do another report and then use that to try to do another report and then use that to configure to show us how to do the scheduled refresh. I'm going to just copy this data into a Google Sheet.
Hello, Yinka. Austin
Yeah.
has his hands up. I think Austin has a question. Austin Eckling.
Yeah,
go
I
on.
have a question.
Go on. Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question, please. My question is,
Okay.
I need a little clarification on this refresh. For example, if I'm using a live data scenario whereby I have data every day that will determine the report I want to do. Before this refresh, do I need to be loading this data before refreshing it or what?
So that's why I was talking. Yes, I get you. So that's why I was talking about this data source credentials and the connection, right? So depending on where your data is stored. Normally, what this means is, so for example, if your data is in an SQL database and people are constantly updating the data, right? These
Okay.
credentials, you have to provide a credential that has access to read from that SQL database, right?
Mm,
Once you
okay.
provide a credential here that has access to that SQL database, you can schedule your refresh. And what that
Okay.
means is every time, for example, yesterday you made sales, you loaded it into the SQL database. Because we have provided a credential here that has access to that SQL database, this data set in Power BI will automatically update that yesterday's data and put it in your report.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes. So if I'm using
Yes. So
Excel, or let's
depending
assume I
on
have
the
an Excel. Sorry, what if
yes,
what
if you are
can it
using
also
Excel,
work on Excel? I have an Excel
if
where
you are
I'm
using
loading all this
Excel
data.
where you are loading the data, yes, it's normally it should also work. Now, right now, I don't know why this guy is not loading the way I want it to load. That's why I want to use Google Sheets to test it. But as long as you have Excel, if you're using Excel, even though it's usually advisable, the so that's why I was okay. We are not supposed to, we don't plan to cover gateways in this class. But if you are using Excel, it's advisable if the Excel is Excel online, right? The Excel online, or
Okay.
you upload the file into OneDrive, because that is the only way you will be able to provide a credential, because the data source credential here is really going to be, for example, because when you have an Excel online, like I was talking when I was talking about Power BI service, you have a link, you can share that file with different people,
People.
because it's possible that is an Excel file that is not necessarily, maybe you are not the creator of that Excel file, maybe it's another person, but as long as the person has granted you access to that file, you can put your own email here, right? But what I'm saying is
Yeah.
it has to be an account that has access to that file. Now, whenever you're using, if this Excel is not Excel online and is an on-premise, that's when it is called an on-premise. What on-premise really means, that the file is not in the cloud. The file is in your desktop. Actually, that's why this guy is not connecting, because this file
Okay.
is on-premise. I need to, every time you want to connect to an on-premise data source, that is a data source that is not in the cloud, you have to create a gateway and use the gateway to connect to the file. But if it is a cloud, a data that is in the cloud, so either it's in a SQL database, is in Azure, is in an Oracle database, all of those kind of places, you will just come here and provide the credential that has rights to connect to that database, and then you can schedule your refresh. Oh, I just remembered that because this is Excel and it's on premise, I have to create a gateway, and we really don't have the time to do that right now. But basically, if this was cloud, what will happen is once I provide the credentials, it's grayed out now because this is not a cloud data. You can just define how often you want it to refresh. So you toggle this on, you put the either it's daily or monthly, and you can add like different times. So you can have up to like here where it says add another time, you can keep adding, you put 8 a.m., 3 a.m., 5 a.m., like that, and it continues to refresh. And here, the good thing about this one is also that, you see where it says send refresh failure notifications to the owner of the semantic model is automatic, but you can add other people. For example, maybe you have other people that work with you in your team. You can add their emails here. What this means is if there's a technical issue, the report is supposed to refresh by 8, and there was a technical issue, so the report did not refresh. You will receive an email in your Outlook inbox saying that, oh, refresh for so and so, report failed, for so and so reason. So you can go and check why it failed and then try to rectify it. But like I said, to answer your question, if it's a cloud, if the data is stored in the cloud, you provide the credentials here. But if the data is on-premise, you need to create a gateway. I think we'll cover that in later classes. You need to create a gateway to be able to connect to the data source. But either ways, once you do this and you configure the refresh, the only thing you need to do is to make sure that the data is updated in the source, not in Power BI. As long as it's updated at the source, your report is going to continue to show up-to-date data.
Oh,
I hope that answers your question.
yes. Thank you very much. Yes. Thank you.
Also,
Okay, let me go.
and did he also have hands up? Did he? Okay, you can go on.
Okay, Ndidi,
You have a
let's say.
question? Yeah. Ndidi, are you there? Okay, please put your hands down if you don't have a question. Okay, Yinka, please go on.
Okay, so I was actually going to my PowerPoint to see if there's anything left, but I think I've covered everything. I will just take questions now if there are any further questions. If anybody has any further questions, please hand is up.
Good evening, ma. I would like
Good
to. I
evening.
don't really understand the part of adding people like to the workspace, people that can view and contribute to the report. Is it that when you are adding people, you have to add people that probably in your organization. So is it under the
Yes,
first page you showed us whereby we add and maybe
I
either
will
select
just
them? I mean,
I will just show you again. Don't worry. Let me just show that again. So,
alright.
like I said, let me go back home and start from home so that you see what we are saying. Like I said, there are two ways, right? You may, in every workspace, usually you have lots of reports, and I'll use roles to explain it to you. For example, I have a workspace for logistics department, and there are different people in logistics. Maybe inside logistics, let's use textilers department since we have textilers. So I go to textilers workspace, right? There's a man, he's the manager of textilers. So he needs to see all the reports that are inside textilers department. So there's no need to be doing hide and seek for him. He's the manager of textilers. I'll just come here. So I'll just go, like I said, you start from home. I go to workspaces. I go to textilers. This man is the manager of textilers. So he needs to have access to the entire workspace. I come here to manage access and I search for his name. Name is Olayinka, whatever. I don't need to necessarily, I just start typing his name. Why is the name not coming up again? Anyway, with somebody in your organization, the name will come up. Okay, sorry. Didn't say add people or groups. So you say add people or groups, you search for him. Let's say his name is Olayinka. Name will come up. You decide what kind of access you want to give him. Do you want to make
Please,
him a viewer, a contributor?
hello, ma. Is it that
Yes.
you've already saved the name on the workspace
I've not
initially?
saved it. The reason why the name will come up, anybody that is within your company,
Mm-hmm.
because this workspace is and this tenant, how do I explain? This Power BI is administered in tenants. It's like a compound. Everybody who lives in this compound, this place
Okay.
knows their name. So the moment you start typing, the reason why there are not many names coming up, like I said, this tenant is my personal tenant, so I'm the only person there. But if this were within your company's tenants, the moment you start typing, all the people who have OL, you will see their names popping up like this. Just the same way in your Outlook, when you start typing, the names pop up, right?
Yes.
Or you can just type the entire email, even if it doesn't pop up. If you type the entire email of the person, it will eventually show. Then you can decide what kind of access you want to give them, and then you can add, right? Now, the
Yes.
person who is not the manager of Textilers and maybe is in Textilers one team, you don't want him to see Textiler two's report. You want him to only see Textiler one report. For that guy, you will come to Textiler one, okay, in this case, Textiler two. You come here and say manage permissions, and then you give him direct access. Either you can give him direct access or you can use a link. Anyone is fine. The difference between this one is that when you put his name again, you start searching for his name. When you put his name here, you can send it to him. You'll receive an email, or you can copy this link and go and send to him. And you can decide what you can do with it. People within the organization, or only these people. Can he share the report? Can he build content with the report? Those are the different ways you can share. But this guy now will only have access to this report, not to the entire workspace. So you can just do direct access and add him as a user. Of course, you can also decide what he can do and cannot do with the report. So that is the difference between you can either grant access to an entire workspace or to a single report in a workspace, depending on their roles and how you want them to interact with the workspace. Does that answer your question?
Yes. Thank you so much, ma'am.
You're welcome. Are there any other hands up?
Hello.
Ndidi's hand is still up. Yes, Ndidi, I can hear you now.
Yes, I lost power on my mouse, so I was unable to unmute my mic when you gave me that chance to speak earlier. So apologies for that.
Right.
So my question is two questions. One is on the refresh. So the SQL you mentioned when we're talking about where new data sets or new data is being imputed. So yes, and we talked about already cleaned data, that's somewhere which we're using to produce different kinds of reports. So my question is it possible to make fresh input into the already cleaned data? And when you mention SQL, are you referring to that already cleaned data? So that question is in the light of what you also said about Excel when somebody asked that can this work in Excel. So that Excel, I was just trying to put it all together in my head. That Excel that is also a working alternative, is it also an already cleaned data in an Excel where you can then go and make fresh input? So how does it all work after you've cleaned up this data and you come in there to make fresh inputs? So it's not clear to me what happens around all this.
Okay. Now let me go back to clearly answer your question. Let me go back to where we transform data, right?
So sorry, before you go there, the second question is regarding where you are right now. So maybe you want to take that first, so I don't take you back front. So the different roles I wanted to understand, and I think someone also posted that question on the platform here. There's a contributor and different from other roles there. So if you can just explain the difference, what's the difference between their capabilities, what they can do.
Okay.
So a contributor, what's his limit? What can a contributor do and not do? Different from what an admin can do and not do. Different from what, or of course, the other a member can do and not do, and the other fourth.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
So if you can see my screen, these are the 4 rows that we have, and this is arranged by order of their powers. They have so many powers. So the lowest one is the viewer. Basically, the only thing the viewer can do, as the name implies, is you can see things. See, finish. You can only see things. Of course, if there's a back arrow, there's a button, you can also interact with all of those buttons and all of that. But you cannot change anything. You can just view. Because we have looked at you and you have said, this guy does not know what's going on in Power BI, but he needs to see which city is making the most money. But that is all. He just needs to see. He does not know what's going on in Power BI, so you don't want to give him access to be changing things because he doesn't even know what is changing. He just needs to have the information that the report is given. So those kind of people, you give them viewer. That's all. They can view the report, they can use back button, whatever button you are put inside, they can use it, but they can't change anything. Those are the viewers. The contributor, they understand things, they can build reports, they can edit reports, they can publish reports. So if depending on company structure, in some companies there are people in different teams outside of the IT team who can build their own reports for their department. So that kind of person, you add them to their department's workspace as contributor so that they can create new reports. They can also publish reports into that workspace. But as you can see, it also comes with power. They can also delete content in the workspace. So they also need to be monitored properly. Now, the next one is the member. The member can add other people to the group, to the workspace, but they can only add people with lower permissions than their own. So they cannot add somebody as admin or even also as member. They can add somebody as a contributor, they can add somebody as a viewer. So that's the key difference between the contributor and the member. The member can add other people. Contributor cannot add other people. They can just create reports, they can publish reports, they can do all sorts of things with reports, but they can't add other people. But the members can add other people with lower permissions. They can also change permissions for the apps that are already published. They can also, I'm going to also still share this PowerPoint with us so that we can make reference to it. And then the admin is the Oga Patapata of all of them. That one can delete the entire workspace. It can remove people, it can remove even other admins, and it can do and undo. So that's the highest rank of the report of the roles. But like I said, I'm going to share this with us also so that we can make reference to it later. Now to your other question about, I can understand you saying that once you publish, people can reuse the clean data. But what if somebody then comes to, you schedule refresh and somebody comes to add data that is dirty to the report? Is the whole entire data set not going to become dirty, or are we not now going to have dirty data plus clean data and all of that? So it was that one I wanted to use Power Query to explain. Now I want you to know that, because see this Power Query that I opened, I want you to know that Power Query is called Power Query because it has powers. Well, not such powers, but is a bit, how do I explain it? It has powers, basically, it can do things, and I will explain what I mean to you. Today, so we have this report or this data set that has how many columns? 21 columns. 21 columns, and
is this the cleaned up data?
Yes, this is our cleaned up data. Let me go back. This is our reports that we were using, that we were doing. So I went to transform data, right?
Okay.
I went to transform data. Now, what I'm trying to tell you is that Power Query cleans, when we talk about cleaning, all these things that we do, if you notice, most times, maybe I'll come here and I'll change this one to So this guy is decimal before. Let's say I change it to whole number. Add a new step. Change it to whole number. The way Power Query executes this instruction, if I come here and click on this change type, if you look at where I'm putting my cursor, this is the guy that executes the instruction. What it basically said is table transform column types. Which column are you changing? Unit cost. Change it to integer 64 from whatever it was. What it means is that action takes place on the entire column. And what it means is that today there are 100 rows. Let's say today there are, I don't know, maybe 1,000 rows in this column. If tomorrow the number of rows in this column, let's say today there are 1,000. If tomorrow the number of rows, I add additional values under this same column and we now have 2,000 rows, this same transformation would happen to even those new ones that are added later, because they became part of. It's like when you join a family and you take their surname, everything that accrues to that surname accrues to you by virtue of the fact that you came into that family, right? So as long as you maintain the columns and you're not as long as the new values that you're adding them to the already existing columns that you have in your previous report. For example, you have an SQL database that tracks sales, right? And the only thing that is just changing is today we made a new sale. It's the same thing that we are recording before that we are still recording. Which city we made the sale is Lagos. How much did we make? The same, basically, as long as you have the same column headers, the new data that you added is not a new column. Everything that you have done, all the transformations that you have made to all those previous columns would also apply to the new data sets that you added. So for example, if I go to the Excel now and add another thing, maybe add another thing to this place, even if I put it in there as a decimal, the moment it comes here, the moment it gets here, this hammer, I can call it a hammer, this hammer will hit it and turn it to a whole number.
So that's where my confusion, but this particular spot is where I became a bit confused. So this document on the screen now is the SQL, correct?
No, it's not SQL. We are inside Power BI now. I was mentioning SQL as another example of a data source. Our current data source now is Excel.
Oh, okay. So that Excel, what we have there is the raw data that has not been cleaned up, correct?
Yes, in Excel. In Excel, we have the raw data. We brought it into this place.
So I know. So now that you have something new to add, like the example you've started using, you made a new cell. So that new cell, is it here you will come and add it, or in that raw Excel?
No, you will add it in that raw Excel.
Okay, and it will automatically come over here and take the shape of what we have set up here, right?
Exactly. If you set up a schedule refresh in your Power BI,
no, I'm not talking about refresh.
It will automatically come here. No, if you don't set up refresh, when you change something, okay, maybe we didn't cover that when we were doing visualization. No, when you change something, can you see this refresh here? Every time you change something in your Excel, you need to come here and manually click this refresh for the new data to come.
Sure. Okay.
So this is in desktop, but because you don't want to be manually coming here to click refresh, is why you publish
set it up a scheduled refresh,
and you set up that scheduled refresh in service. So because you don't want to be manually clicking refresh here every day, You set up that refreshing
Yeah.
service, and every time you put new data in your Excel, that guy in service will refresh it and apply all the cleaning that you have applied. The only time that cleaning will not be applied is if you now add an additional column. If you add an
I was
additional
going to
column,
ask that in the Excel, right?
yes. If you
So,
if you had an additional column that was not here before in the Excel, the new column will show when you refresh, but there will be no cleaning because that guy is new and you didn't set any hammer for that guy.
yeah.
So, but the way to do it is you can then come here. If you need to clean something in that column, you can't do it in service. You have to come here in desktop, come back to your Power Query, maybe that new column, you see it here as whatever it is. If there's any cleaning you need to do, you clean it, you save, you will now republish to service. When you republish, if you use the same name, it will ask you if you wanted to replace the old one, then it will replace the old one. But if you are not adding a new column, you don't have to do any new cleaning. The cleaning that you have done before is going to cover the new cells that you are adding in your Excel.
On the okay. So from all this, it looks to me like the hardest part for me is the transformation that happens from Excel to this Power Query. This other one is the Power Query, right? The one you just left.
Yes,
Where you
yes, the
clean
Power
data
Query.
is. So transferring
Yes.
transforming that data from Excel to the Power Query is the biggest deal for me. I don't know for others, but it's like
Yes,
I'm
and that's
totally
why
lost.
and that's why okay, how do you mean you are lost? You mean how to transfer the data from Excel to here?
To clean it up because it looks like you have to write different formulas. I've gone
No,
through
you're
this
not
like
writing any
I've
formula.
gone.
You saw that this formula, I didn't write it though. You just click buttons. So when you do your get data, for example, and were you in the first class? Which class did we do
I,
get data? First class or the second class? You can try to watch the videos again, but like I said, so after okay, so let's assume, let me just try to do a quick recap. After you do your get data, you come here when you click transform data. If I want to change this guy, for example, so you see this guy is unit cost. What is beside it here is the data type. If I want to change the data type, this 1.2 means that it's decimal. If I want to change it to whole number, I just click on this whole number here. I'm not the one writing the code. Power BI writes the code by itself. My own is just to be clicking button. It changes to whole number. This one that is whole number, if I want to change it to decimal, I'll come here and click decimal and it changes. But again, because there's no decimal in it, so nothing really happens. So I want to change this one to maybe currency with dollar or fixed decimal, like that. So you're not really the one doing anything. If I want to change, what else? This data is really clean, so there's not much to change there. And there, like I said, if you were in the class where we actually took data transformation, there's a lot you can do if you had dirty data. For example, maybe this data had different spaces in between. There's a lot more if you right click, you see all the things you can do. You can remove duplicates, you can remove errors, you can replace values, you can split columns, you can even trim if there is maybe like spaces in between. So there's a whole lot that you can do. And when you do all those things, just like I said, that hammer or that transformation stays with that column. So every time you add a new value under that same column, they take the same rule that you have set, right? And like I said, actually, so cleaning your data is in real life, cleaning data is actually a big chunk of the work that data analysts do. And that's why Power Query was structured in such a way that once you clean your data the first time, even if you update it, you don't have to reclean it again. It basically saves those rules in memory. And every time you add new rules, new cells, you don't have to reclean your data. Because actually, most times in real life, when you have a table that tracks your sales, it's not very often that you add new columns to it. It's the same columns. You just add new values under for the new date, like that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it continues. So once you do that, once you sit down and do that cleaning once, maybe at the beginning of the year or something, you don't have to keep doing it again. Just set up your schedule refresh in Power BI, and every morning everybody has fresh data as often as they want it. And if you want, depending on the nature of the business, people actually set up hourly refreshes, especially for streaming data where data is coming in almost per second. People set up hourly refreshes, and you may not even have to open Power BI desktop for another 1 month because the data is refreshing fine in service. The only time you have to come to Power BI services, maybe they want some other kind of modification to the report that you cannot do in service. But yeah, that's it. Let's close this. Are there any more
Okay, thank you
questions?
very
Is
much.
this You're welcome. Just do any other hand. Okay, I don't see any hands.
Are you going to
So
teach us dashboarding?
I don't know if we're still going to have next week's class. If we do, then we would cover it. If we don't, then it will be in the advanced class that we would have maybe later in the year. Who's Amaka's hand is up? Who's Amaka?
Can you unmute, Uzamaka?
So while we're waiting for Uzamaka, let me just speak to dashboarding. Like I said, we may cover it in the next class or in the advanced class. But basically, a dashboard is just so like today now I was showing us from that report we created. From that data set we created 2 reports. And in the example of logistics department that I gave, so let's assume that inside logistics there are 4 units and 4 of them have their reports. But then we want to have one dashboard that shows a brief overview of what happens in the 4 different departments. Power BI actually allows you to sort of pick the most important visuals in each of those reports and put them in one dashboard. You do it in Power BI service. You just basically click on the visual and say pin, 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 and you pin all the most important charts basically from all of those 4 reports and pin them to one dashboard.
You're not
I
sharing
can
your
publish.
screen.
Yes, I didn't mean to share my screen because I'm not really covering it. I'm just trying to explain it. Yeah, so you can pick different charts from those different reports and pin them to one dashboard. And that dashboard would, of course, also update as often as those individual reports are updated. So that's basically what a dashboard is. But yeah, I wanted to actually ask how our project is going so that we'll know whether we'll use next class to support the project or to take another class. Uzamaka, can you unmute and speak?
So while we're waiting for Uzamaka, have you assigned a project to Group H?
I would assume so. I'm not part of the project team exactly, but I understand that projects have been assigned. Is it that some groups have not been assigned?
I've always been assigned to
projects.
All groups have been assigned.
I haven't seen our project though. I haven't seen our
Is there
project,
anybody
but
else
I've
in
always
Group
had a
H?
group.
Yeah. Is there anybody else
Is
in Group
anybody in
H?
Group H?
Yes, I'm in group H.
Group
H
H.
before,
Is it
but
H or A?
H for house. H for house.
H for house.
Yeah.
Have you been assigned project?
Yes.
Yes.
Ndidi, please contact us now. They say if we have been assigned project.
We have a project already, and we've created WhatsApp group. I'll send you a link. We have WhatsApp group.
Okay.
I've posted that link everywhere. So, Ndidi, please just click on go to your team. Once you enter there, go to the announcements, you see the link. Go to our project group, you see the link. We actually have a WhatsApp group already. We have a meeting tomorrow by 4 on Sunday, please.
Okay, thank you, Estina. Yes, we heard you loud and clear. So let's not forget the attendance. Thank you, Franca. Franca has pasted the attendance link in the chat.